We're again looking at some of the questions concerning the end times and the coming of Christ, and we're looking at the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24. The Lord is saying certain things, certain major events will happen prior to His return, and some of those are ongoing things like wars and rumors of wars and famines and earthquakes. These are not necessarily signs that the return of Christ is imminent. But starting in verses 9 through 14, I believe He's now moving to the very end of time, after the rapture of the church, and during what we call the tribulation period, which is much more detailed in the book of Revelation and somewhat in the book of Daniel. But Jesus is hitting some of the highlights here, and we'll look at a few of those. During this tribulation period, as things heat up towards the end, and Christ is not here yet, but they're heating up, He says this, verse 9, "They will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you'll be hated by all nations because of my name." Now, He is probably talking to Jewish people at this point, Jewish believers who are following Jesus Christ in His name, but this could include all believers, I think, alive on the planet as things heat up towards the end, as the Antichrist begins to take over the planet, and just prior to the coming of Christ. Those who follow the Lord, Revelation chapter 6, many of them will be martyred. Many will lose their life for the name of Christ, but yet Christ is not yet returned yet. And it says many false prophets will arise and deceive many. And so there's always been false prophets, but now we're looking at some intensified false prophecies and prophets, most likely a reference to the Antichrist himself here, who will be the ultimate false prophet of all times, who will proclaim himself to be God, set himself up in the temple of God, according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. What a deceiver he is. And because lawlessness is multiplied, most people's love will grow cold. It's kind of an amazing thing to think that this Antichrist figure, this beast, as talked about in Revelation, will be a hateful being, an absolutely wicked individual. He will bring much distress and pain on the planet, and yet people will follow him. And their love for God will grow cold. Perhaps the love for one another will grow cold as well. And they're going to be following one who is cold-hearted. But the one who endures to the end, he'll be saved. Now, this is not a verse of Scripture dealing with eternal security. Some people have taken it that way, and I think it's a mistake. This is in a context of the end times, of events prior to the coming of Christ. And he's saying those that are in this tribulation period who will endure to the end, who are not martyred, he just mentioned the martyrs, but those who are not martyred, they'll be saved. That is, they'll be rescued out of this time. When we come to the end of the Olivet Discourse, chapter 25 in particular, and we go to the book of Revelation, we find that many who go through this great tribulation period will be rescued out of that tribulation. They will live. Many will be martyred, but some will be rescued, and that's who he speaks of here. And then this verse 14 is often misunderstood, but this gospel of the kingdom shall be proclaimed in the whole world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. Now, there's something very special going to happen during the tribulation period, and that is the gospel of the kingdom. That's the same gospel we preach today, except there is also a reference to the coming kingdom the Lord is going to set up on the earth. That kingdom is coming, and that gospel that points to the kingdom is being preached. We find in the book of Revelation that two witnesses step forward and begin to proclaim the gospel to the world, and the world can't stop them. The Antichrist can't stop them until the Lord lets that happen. Also, 144,000 are apparently Jewish believers are saved, and they go out evangelizing the world, telling people about Christ. There are angels during that time who speak the gospel from the heavens, and then multitudes of people, Jews and Gentiles, will go forth as witnesses for Christ. So that the whole world at this point is saturated with the gospel that they need to hear. And when the world is saturated with the gospel at that point, then the end will come, Jesus says. Now, some take this verse to speak of today, that we need to reach all the lost tribes and all the lost people around the globe before Christ can return. But I think they're missing the context. The context is of those alive during the tribulation period. The events that lead up to the second coming of Christ after the rapture, but before he returns. The gospel at that point will be spread throughout the whole globe, and all the world will hear the gospel. And when that task is finished, and finally the Great Commission is complete, then the end will come and the Lord will return. Looking forward to that day when the Lord is finally here on earth setting up his kingdom, but we got a long ways to go before we get to that point in our study. We'll look at some more tomorrow. Hope you can join us.